Hi, this is Brad Power, and this is the Cancer Patient Lab. This is our weekly webinar. Today, we're honored to have with us Mike Harris of TriCan Health. He's going to be talking about some new uh, clinical trial matching around various cancers. They're starting in pancreatic cancer, but I'm sure he'll explain that's probably just a beachhead for broader things he can talk about where they're going in the future. Before we get started, just want to cover our standard housekeeping items. The first is that this is for medical information only. This is not medical advice. We try to arm our patients with information they can take to their medical team. Secondly, everything here will be made public. We're very open source. So if you're concerned about having your image shared, your name, or what you say, you can turn off your video, change your name, and don't say anything. And finally, we are a nonprofit 501c3, and we depend on the kindness of volunteers and donors. So if you're inspired to donate, that's easily done through our website where there's a donate button, and we're always looking for volunteers. With that, I'll turn it over to Mike.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Brad, and for everyone for attending today. I realize that time's precious, so I appreciate you spending a bit with me. What I'd like to do is review with you what we're doing within TriCan Health, and let me just share my screen if I may, and I'll make sure that that's working properly before proceeding further. So let me just check. Can you all see my screen?
Yeah, working. You might want to do full screen mode or something.
Yep, let me do that, make sure, and hopefully it'll stay in this screen when I do that. Great. So y'all can see that well? Terrific. So like I say, TriCan Health is the name of the company. You can see the URL here, and I'll provide additional access to it later on. What I'd like to do is just define what we are, what we're not, and then step through some information of what we're doing and why we're doing it. And I'll also provide a demo of the sites that you all can see. And perhaps we have someone in Kathy Peterson who's working through pancreatic cancer right now. And if she's willing, we might be able to do a live search based on her specific conditions and give you a sense of how the platform would work. As Brad suggested, this is a specific focus right now in pancreatic cancer in the United States, but we are intending to expand to other forms of cancer as we can expand the platform. With respect to what TriCan is, we're a digital platform. So similar to Cancer Patient Lab in terms of providing information and insight, our goal is to help patients make informed decisions throughout their treatment journey. We are specifically servicing pancreatic cancer patients in the US. We have capabilities to provide navigation for clinical trials, so understanding more about clinical trials, information about the disease, and information about how clinical trials work and how they don't, and also make things easy to access and understand from a clinical trial availability perspective. This is an exceptionally knowledgeable group of patients and practitioners, and I think you all are sort of self-selected in that way. We've tried to make the platform accessible to folks who are less knowledgeable than you all, and provide an access form so that people who are more knowledgeable and sort of understand the ins and outs of trials and cancer treatments to be able to navigate it effectively. We use clinicaltrials.gov as our primary source of information. As I think you all know, that is the government registry of all trials that are actually occurring in the US and in fact around the world. We augment that with supplemental information that makes it easier to understand. Because I'll tell you, I am not a medical or scientific person by background. I come from a technology background, and I find clinicaltrials.gov to be gobbledygook to sort of the normal language that I would speak. And we've tried to make it a little more accessible while still providing enough specificity that knowledgeable patients and physicians can get value from it. And honestly, that's a tough balance to strike, and I'd welcome your input on whether we're hitting that or not. What we do is an unbiased approach. I came from a company called Gartner that does technology advisory reviews. It's a company based in Stamford, Connecticut. And I spent a lot of time there. And the premise of that company was to provide an unbiased perspective on providing a match, in that case, between people who were buying software and other forms of technology and the various providers of technology. The key was to be unbiased, impartial, and accurate. And I've taken that strategy and applied it, in this case, to matching pancreatic cancer clinical trials. So we're not trying to bias one trial sponsor over another or one form of treatment over another. Rather, we want to make the best possible match based on the patient's needs, where they're physically located, of course, their treatment history, and their particular form of cancer. And most importantly, we want to make it patient-centric, we want to make it comprehensive, and it's always free for use by patients and their physicians. We want to make it a sustainable business by charging a sponsorship fee from the trial sponsors themselves, because getting their information in front of patients who are actively considering clinical trials is very valuable for them. So we're trying to make the business self-sustaining in that way. In terms of who I am, I'm on the right-hand side. I was with this company called Gartner, like I say, and my background is in information technology. Frankly, the more interesting partner in this business is my wife, Kimya Harris, who, like, I'm trying to see my notes here, like Emma Stivelman, is a molecular biologist. So she is a PhD in cellular molecular biology. She did bench research on different forms of cancer for a portion of her career. She was in patent law for a while in the biotech space. And she was a biotech executive in Cambridge, Massachusetts, as well as Waltham, Massachusetts, for a period of time. She wanted to help patients actually get access to the kinds of treatments that her companies were developing, and was frankly surprised at how hard that was, because these companies, these biotech companies, these pharmaceutical companies, do all this work to generate amazing new compounds and potential cures and treatments for cancer. And yet it's really, really hard to get access to those, especially in the early stages. We discovered this while trying to help particular patients find access to clinical trials, had a devil of a time trying to get access to them, and realized that there had to be a better way and make it more accessible, like you can get access to so many other bits of information, from, travel options to buying an automobile to shopping for auto insurance. All these simpler, less important decisions can be researched online, and yet this critically important life-saving decision is really, really difficult. So we wanted to make it easier, first and foremost for the patients, and secondly for other users as well, like advocacy organizations and physicians. So as you all know, the problem for patients really comes down to trying to find information around clinical trials, and also the recognition that most trials are run at academic hospitals, but only about 20% of patients are treated at academic hospitals. So if you think of the MD Andersons, the various hospitals like here in Boston, the Mass General, Brigham, and so forth, excellent trials are run at these institutions, but doctors in those institutions are generally unaware of trials that are happening just down the street at another hospital. And if you're in a more remote area, rural area, there's very limited access to trial information for a particular site. What we found is that a lot of patients are within driving distance, typically, to one of these academic hospitals, and there are a number of services that can get you to even further, more distant hospitals as well. But those things are rarely known about, and they're hard to find. We also found this gap between clinical trial enrollment in terms of interest, and there have been surveys done that say that about 75% of patients are interested in learning more about trials. Only about 20% feel that they're adequately informed about trial options by their doctor, and at the end, only about 8% enroll in clinical trials. What's interesting is that that's not on the doctor's fault, really, because doctors are surveyed, and it turns out that about 70% of doctors are interested in finding trial options for their patients, but they too are challenged in trying to find those options. So we see it as an opportunity to help sort of bridge these gaps. And we view it in three different ways. So the company name is TriCan. It's got a triangle because we see there's three primary stakeholders in this process. There's the patients themselves, there's their physicians, and then there's the biopharma companies that are clinical trial sponsors that are running these different trials. The information passing between these three parties isn't very good. It's not effective. It's not efficient. It's an inefficient market, if you will. And our goal is to make this communication more effective and more helpful for all parties involved. So we want to bridge these gaps between these three areas and make sure that we can help all three parties. On the sponsor front, for a biotech or a pharmaceutical company, from their perspective, they're also trying to find patients to enroll in these trials. About 40% of trials don't meet their enrollment goals. 10% of trials fail outright because they just can't get enough patients. And this is a real problem for the community in terms of developing new treatments for cancer, because they're spending literally billions of dollars to get to this stage, and suddenly that science is just gone, and then patients aren't helped with that potential treatment path. So that's what we want to solve. We do it by helping each one of these three stakeholders actually access the information and essentially find one another, making it easier for doctors to do searches for their particular patient sets, for individual patients to access the information, and then for allowing the sponsors to actually get their info into the hands of patients who are actively considering trials. Now, I'll walk through the actual demo in a minute, but essentially we've got two different paths that users can access the information. The first one is optimized for a patient, perhaps a less sophisticated patient who doesn't know all the details of their disease, and they can choose information that they do know about their diagnosis. Say, I don't know, for a variety of things that they might not know about, and get access to summaries of trials that are first and foremost close to them. We kind of view this, if most of you probably aren't actively dating at the moment, but if you are, if you know people who are, they're on dating platforms, and that can be anything from Match.com to Tinder and all these other ones. And we view it in a simplistic sense like one of those platforms. And I say that because our goal is not to get two people married, right? We're not going to go through the whole process of marriage here. There's still informed consent. You still have to qualify. You're still going to speak with your physician. You're still going to speak with the enrolling site. All that still has to occur. We're just trying to get you on a first date. So if we can successfully provide a match that says, listen, there's a potential match between you and a trial, we want to help facilitate that connection, increase your comfort and familiarity with dating again, if you will, and then make sure that you can actually find the information that you need about this trial. So that's really our intent, and I'll step you through that in a few minutes. The screen that I just showed you a moment ago was of the sort of patient-facing version, if you will. We have something called targeted search that I think will be most useful for this audience, because you all, like I say, are sort of unusually well-informed in looking for cancer treatments and understanding specifics about your disease state. And essentially, this allows you to do specific searches. And this is the one that I'll demo in a moment so that you can see sort of how it works. So I'll get there in just 1 second. And in the result, in the end, when you get through to seeing which trials might be a potential match for you, we provide everything in what we call a trial snapshot. So think of it as a one-screen view. Everything that we're going to do today is on a desktop, because I think we're all on those. But the platform is actually optimized for use on a mobile device. So we designed it first and foremost to work on an iPhone or an Android, because we know that most patients are accessing it in that way. Currently, our usage pattern is about 30 to 40% of users are currently accessing via mobile devices. A lot of folks who are looking at it a little more rigorously will look at it from a desktop, but if you're a casual patient, it's often done on a mobile device. And one of the things that informed me about this is I was speaking with a caregiver whose wife was working through a rare form of pancreatic cancer. And he was describing that they were sitting on their porch deck at a place that they'd rented out on Cape Cod for the weekend. And she was sitting there having her morning coffee at 7 in the morning on her mobile phone and actually scrolling through what trials were available, looking for, new treatments that might be promising. And I thought, if we can help provide a platform that is accessible to that use case, to that situation, then we would have a really good example to follow up. In the result, or in the end, what you get is this snapshot that says, is the trial currently recruiting? What is the title of it? Is there a summary that's accessible and understandable for each of these trials? Are there any particular biomarkers? So KRAS is a particular biomarker which is very common in pancreatic cancers. It's also present in many other solid tumors. So that's an example of a biomarker that would be flagged. We summarize the trial design. We talk about the treatment groups so that the patient and their physician would understand what they might be receiving based on which group they'd be randomized into. Of course, we show a map of where the locations for that trial might be. Some trials are in a single location, most are in multiple locations, and we prioritize the ones that are close to the individual user. We talk about the line of therapy, which is actually not something that is found in clinicaltrials.gov. So if you're a physician and you have a patient that comes to you and says, listen, I've already gotten one round of chemotherapy, my cancer has come back and I need a second approach, they will need to look for trials that are for a second line of therapy. That's not an easy thing to find in clinicaltrials.gov as it exists today. So we added a layer of information on that to make it much faster so a physician can filter and say, listen, I just want to look for trials that are appropriate for second or third or fourth line of therapy. And then we have contact information, some that is specific to the individual enrolling site and some for the trial overall. And then we allow you to navigate, to share, to save, and to access this information on an ongoing basis. So that's really what we're trying to do in total. But one of the questions that Brad asked me early was, all right, so this is interesting, Mike, but there's other platforms that do this, and there are. So what's different about what you're doing, and how are you positioned in the marketplace, if you will? And we think there's three main things: the platform being enhanced, collaborative, and it being the platform. So by enhanced, it's not just using information that's coming from clinicaltrials.gov without any modifications. Most other search engines that allow you to search for trials are exactly that. They just use the feed from clinicaltrials.gov. It's good. It's better than getting it from clinicaltrials.gov directly because it's a little more readable, but there's nothing additive to that. So things like line of therapy, simplified and more understandable trial summaries, indications of whether the FDA has approved this particular treatment for perhaps another form of cancer. I think that's a very helpful thing to think this might be approved for other forms of GI cancer or others, but it just hasn't been tested in pancreatic patients yet. That to me is helpful information. So that's one thing that we add. We do make it collaborative. So by having a physician interface as well as a patient interface, and they can share the same trial summaries, the intent is to allow for shared decision-making between patient and physician to actually find the right answers for that particular patient. And then lastly, it's a platform. And by that, I mean, it's bringing together a community of different resources that can solve a various set of problems. So you all know this better than I do, but it's not just about what you're working through as a patient and what your physician is working through in terms of trying to connect you to a particular trial or treatment path. It's about understanding, are there nurse or patient navigators that can help you understand the process or identify additional resource providers that might provide financial or logistical assistance. So if you're traveling somewhere for a trial and you need help with a hotel in Houston, Texas to attend a trial at MD Anderson, does somebody offer that on a for free basis? Yes, they do, but I can tell you that it is highly fragmented and hard to find some of those providers. So we want to augment our current platform with additional elements that would allow for finding those kinds of services very easily. We want to help contract research organizations, advocacy organizations, and of course, the sponsors themselves provide services to patients in the entire community. So our goal is to help increase communication across all these different parties. I'm going to go through a demonstration in a minute. During that demo, what I'd like to do is to ask for your questions. I see a bunch of questions that have come through in the comments, and I'm going to get to that in one second. I also want to touch on this idea of getting care in community centers versus academic medical centers. What barriers you all may have found in your own journeys and ways that we should be thinking about how to make that easier. Perhaps ways to address different forms of trial hesitancy. I see this all the time in Facebook groups of people who are more eager to try alternative medicines than they seem to be for more scientifically proven clinical trials, which I find interesting and something that I'd love to understand more. I'd also like to discuss a little bit of your perspectives on artificial intelligence, because like I said, I spent my career in technology and I found AI mislabeled, frankly. I view it as augmented intelligence, not artificial, in that it is a supplement or an add-on to what we as people know and can do. It's not a substitute, it's not a replacement, but it is a helpful addition. And then lastly, I would say, your feedback today and on an ongoing basis would be invaluable so that we can make this a better platform. Folks like Rob Wecker have been doing this with us for some time, and I think we're far better for it. And I need more and would welcome more so that we can make it better constantly. And then, of course, kindly share this to anyone who's working through pancreatic cancer specifically in the near term, and as we extend into other cancers in the future, hopefully we hope to help a broader community. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing this deck. I'm going to address some of the questions in the chat, and then we will, let me see if I can do this. And then we will switch over to demo as well. Let me do this.
We also we also use the raise hand feature if people have questions they want to raise besides the chat. So that's another way people can submit questions. Mike, could I just ask one before we get started on the positioning question? As you said, we've had sessions with My Tomorrows and Massive Bio, which also provide clinical trial matching. You're focused on pancreatic cancer. Can you sort of make the case for why your focus on pancreatic cancer might be better for pancreatic cancer patients?
Certainly. So there are great platforms. Massive Bio is one. There's another, which is Ancora.ai. Both are great services, and they offer the comparable capability of matching a patient to potential trials. So those are great alternatives for sure. I think the distinction is that the focus that we have in pancreatic cancer specifically allows us to identify just those trials that are relevant for pancreatic cancer patients. So as an example, there's about 13,000 active cancer trials occurring in the US right now. About 600 of those are specifically relevant for pancreatic cancer. And a smaller subset, about 400, are actively recruiting targeted for pancreatic cancer specifically, or for solid tumors of which pancreatic cancer is a named element. And what I'm doing is sort of narrowing the scope, if you will, to reduce the number of false positive results that a person might get if you're looking for a form of cancer and it's trying to troll this larger database of 13,000. We've intentionally narrowed it specific to pancreatic cancer patients so that we eliminate these false positives, some of the noise that can be discouraging for patients who are looking for a fast solution or a fast answer quickly. And I'll credit Rob Wecker here, who guided us early on. He said, listen, I don't want to get a list of, 15 or 25 trials that may or may not be a good fit for me. I want to see the 2 or 3 that are the best match, and I want to see those right up front. And I want to make sure that if I am seeing a larger list, because I might want to keep looking for them, I at least can see it in a prioritized manner. So to answer your question, Brad, what we try to do is prioritize it specifically by narrowing the set of potential answers to just those that are relevant for pancreatic cancer. And then we prioritize the heck out of it, including a variety of factors, including everything from phasing of the trial to location of the trials, so that the user can see just those things that are most relevant for them first and foremost.
And just one other question, when you're onboarding people, one of our big focuses in the cancer patient lab is diagnostics. And you hope that people have a good foundation of information about their care and sharing their medical records, but they should have DNA sequencing. Maybe they should have, there are a lot of, there can be immune system profiling, there can be liquid biopsies, there can be RNA sequencing, proteomics, metabolomics, blah, blah, blah. Do you help make sure that the people that are entering into the question, how do I match my profile with the clinical trials, have the right foundation of information about their own situation?
Yes, with the caveat that, I mentioned hesitancy earlier. I experience and have witnessed extreme hesitancy in people's willingness to put in personal information anywhere online. And we first witnessed this where we had asked a woman to use our platform and say, could you please try it out? Tell us what you think. And she said, I'm happy to do that, but I don't want to enter my real email address. And the same was true of looking at alternative sites as well. Fair enough. And for all the good reasons that we know, right? There are a lot of scams online and a lot of bad actors, and I understand that. My point is that I've seen hesitancy in releasing something as publicly available as an email address. So what we didn't want to make the platform was reliant on someone. We didn't want to require someone to upload something as sensitive as their medical data. I think if someone has that information, is able to access their electronic medical record, there are sites, and Massive Bio is a good example of one where they are specifically focused on accessing that information, using the genetic testing in order to find a very well-matched trial. And I would encourage folks to do that who are able and willing to do so. What we've tried to do is to make it easy so that you can enter as much or as little information as you have or as you want to, so that you can increase your familiarity with trials. Again, the concept being we want a first date. We don't not targeting the marriage necessarily. So we want to increase familiarity, comfort, facilitate the conversation between patient and physician, and ideally find a trial that's right for them as a result, rather than try and get every bit of information up front and find the precise match. We wanted to reduce the barriers to access, give answers quickly, so that a patient would increase their familiarity rather than feeling like, oh my goodness, this is overwhelming. I can't answer all these questions and I don't want to upload all my personal information. So it's a strategy and a positioning that we've taken. And I'd welcome your feedback on whether you think that's a good one or not, and happy to take that.
Very much think it's the right way to go. The other thing you did mention is building trust over time. So as you have this dialogue, you're probably adding value and they start to develop trust. So you evolve to a more trusting relationship. That's all the questions I have. Back to if you want to go through the chat questions or if anyone wants to raise their hand.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, you all go ahead and raise your hands now. And in the meantime, what I'll do is address a couple questions in the chat, and then I'll come back to the questions to raise hands. And Brad, if you can help me just moderate that, because I won't be able to do everything effectively. So thank you for that. I see what suggested pancreas cancer versus other cancers for the beta. I think that's from Rick. So thank you, Rick. It was twofold. One is the severity of pancreatic cancer. So it's, as you know, the survival rates are not great. And the number of trials was relatively limited. So like I said, there are about 600 trials, about 400 that are really actively recruiting. By comparison, breast cancer and prostate cancer are both much more prevalent. They're both much more survivable. And there's a lot of ongoing trials on those. We wanted to focus on something that was most urgent for patients, where medical advances are most needed, and where there was a small enough number of trials so that we could literally get our hands around the information and work it manually, so that in parallel we could develop our AI approaches and make sure it was accurate. So if there's too many trials, it diminishes the ability to do things on a manual basis, and we wanted to be able to do it manually so we could compare those results with what we were running through AI systems. So that's how we ended up on pancreatic cancer from a business perspective. And then from a personal perspective, we lost my mother-in-law to pancreatic cancer about 10 years ago now, and sort of saw firsthand what a tough disease it is, and the trial that she went through, and trying to find those trials and so forth. So there was a personal connection to pancreas cancer as well. There's another question which you might have already answered a little bit online, which is, as advocates, how do we protect patients against academic conflicts of interest where research clinicians improperly advise and enroll patients? This is an interesting question, and I see Rick's been addressing this in a bit. What I've seen is it's almost like, I'll put it in layman's terms. To a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? You're familiar with that expression. And I think if you are a physician who's running a particular trial, almost by nature, you're going to be looking for patients that fit that particular trial. So what I've witnessed is not that the physician is improperly, matching a patient to a trial. It's just that's the one they're most familiar with. They have confidence in the science, which is why they signed up to be an enrolling site for it. They may be the principal investigator on the trial, so they're really excited about it. And the sponsors, the biopharma companies that are in the background, are often relying on that key opinion leader sort of driving it with his or her personal passion to enroll those patients. So I've seen it. What I've witnessed is less, they're doing it in the best interest of the patient, but they're scope, their purview is limited to what they know. And they may just be unfamiliar with trials that might be available just down the street. Like I see this between Dana-Farber and the Brigham and Mass General. These hospitals in Boston area, they're often unfamiliar with trials that are locally available. And we want to make this information more available to those physicians and to their patients. Last point on this aspect, which is all that said, our goal is not to provide more options to patients and physicians who already have local trials to enroll in. I think it'd be great. That'd be a wonderful side benefit. Our real goal is the 80% of patients who aren't being presented with any options because they're not being treated at an academic medical facility, and their doctor just says, hey, you know what, you sign up for FOLFIRINOX. And then if that doesn't work, we go to Gemabraxine because that's the next line of therapy in the standard of care. And that's the patient that we're looking to help first and foremost. Let me see if I can, I'm not going to be able to read these quickly. So let me see, are there anybody that raised their hand? I can answer those questions. If not, let me tackle one more. I see one from Eric Dishman, which I'll answer. All right. Eric says, Mike, where do your enhancements like line of therapy come from? Is this automated or do you research the trials in more detail? Right now, Eric, we're doing this manually. So we're reading through, and for any of you who have read the inclusion exclusion criteria on clinicaltrials.gov, it is like having your teeth drilled. But there is good information in there. The problem with it is unstructured text. And for those of you with a technology background, the unstructured bit is challenging because it's not what's called metadata. You can't put a quick filter on it. So one of the things we're looking to do technologically is to apply artificial intelligence to that very narrow use case. So not to provide an overall answer in terms of, hey, what trial is good for me, but specifically to look at the inclusion exclusion criteria and to categorize each element to say, you know, does it require good liver function or particularly good kidney function, because some chemicals reply or respond to those things differently. So we're looking to categorize that kind of information. And that's some of the enhancements that we're looking to do on a scalable technical level. But to answer your question directly, Eric, we do it manually today.
2 months ago, FYI, clinicaltrials.gov was headed down the path of creating more of that as metadata. I have no idea now, just no clue.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's an adage in technology and everywhere else, which is, you know, garbage in, garbage out, and it's not garbage, but it's not structured. So right now, it's a free text field that the researchers can enter whatever they want, and that's harder to parse. The other challenge that I've seen, Eric, and you may have as well, is that clinicaltrials.gov is used as competitive intelligence tool for biotech companies to look at what the other guy is doing. They don't always provide all the information or the most up-to-date information in there. So part of our model is to say, listen, you can sponsor a trial, and as part of that service, we'll provide you a platform for more up-to-date, accurate, targeted information to provide it to patients and physicians who are really looking at it for the purpose for which it's intended, which is to, you know, to get care. And that's something that we want to do, is to enhance further what's on clinicaltrials.gov. Cindy Ness, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for the presentation. I work with patients, and even ones who are really educated about their condition might have a hard time parsing through all the possibilities and not know how to think about themselves in relation to those possibilities. So I was wondering how much hands-on, let's say, effort do you have with patients directly? That's part one. And part two is, have you rolled this out to oncologists? You may have said this, I may have missed it. And you know, what kind of feedback have you gotten? Is this something that they embrace? Is this something they feel threatened by? Somewhere in between.
Great. Thank you for this question, Cindy. So your first one was hands-on, right? How much hands-on capability can we offer? It's an interesting thing. So there's several organizations, advocacy groups that help pancreatic cancer patients specifically. So Let's Win Pancreatic Cancer is one. PanCan is the biggest one. What's fascinating to us is we know the folks in those organizations quite well. PanCan estimates that they only serve about 16% of pancreatic cancer patients in the United States. 16. So that was a surprisingly low number to me for a totally free service, which is completely hand-holding, right? You can call and get a case navigator, essentially, to help you walk through the entire process, answer your questions, help you find trials, and do other things. The learning that I had from that, Cindy, was that a number of patients don't want the hand-holding service. They want to do it themselves, at least to start. So my answer to your question is, we currently don't have a good hand-holding service capability. We're small enough where we can do it manually. Literally, if any of you need help, call me. I will personally walk you through the site and help you get there. One of the capabilities we want to offer in the future, one of the spokes on that wheel I showed earlier, is a navigation capability. And I envision having a network of nurse and patient navigators available to work with individual patients. So that's something that we want to offer on the platform, but we don't today. So yes, I agree that for some patients it's helpful and we want to offer that in the future. B, for a lot of patients, they don't want that. They want to do it themselves. And that's what we address in our current offering today. The second question you asked was around oncologists and how do they view it. I can best describe it with an oncologist that we met in South Carolina maybe a year or so ago. And he was very familiar with the 2 trials that he had running in his hospital for pancreatic cancer specifically. He was unaware of the trials that were offered on the other side of this mid-sized city in South Carolina. Didn't know what they were offering. And he kind of said, well, why should I do their job for them? Was his response in terms of directing patients to another hospital. And so I viewed it as for those. So he said those things. And he said, if a patient comes to me with a specific trial, then yes, I will help them. But no, meaning at another facility. But no, I'm not going to proactively look for trials at another facility. So we viewed it as a good indication that if we can put information into the hands of the patient, they could come to their physician and say, hey, there's a trial at our hospital here, and there's another one across the city. What do you think about this one? Physicians are great. They will absolutely work with a patient on that potential, but they may not proactively bring up that option to them. So that was our intent in providing this service. And we found that physicians, oncologists specifically, like it because it takes too long to look on clinicaltrials.gov. But they're excited to use the platform and they're willing to do so, especially if the patient brings it to their attention.
And just the last thing, how do you get this platform, this wonderful opportunity in front of the patient? In other words, sometimes there's so much information out there.
There is.
And if patients aren't told about that, let's say by the practitioners they're working with, how do you intend to get it in front of them?
There's a few ways, and there's some which involve, advertising and social media campaigns and that sort of thing. And I think that's necessary, but not sufficient. Our goal is to make it so easy, intuitive, and helpful that word of mouth and sort of informal networks help spread the information. And so far, that has been the case. We've had a couple thousand people come to the site, and we've done 0 advertising so far. We've done a lot of work with organizations and groups like this one, but our intent is to continue doing that and to make it so helpful and differentiated that people share it by themselves, and then we'll supplement that with the typical sort of marketing spend that organizations would do. Raj, I see you raising your hand. The old-fashioned way.
Yeah. Yes, I couldn't figure this out. If you have a certain mutation, you might find a number of trials. Do you have the capability to identify which of the trials are best for you based on, say, perhaps your tumor profile or your germline or what have you?
Within limits, yes. So, and I say that because even if we looked at every bit of information that's available about a given trial, so what's your bilirubin level? What's your prior history, or have you ever had any prior form of cancer? Something called an ECOG score, which is sort of your physical abilities and sort of overall health measures. Even if you get all of those things which are available on clinicaltrials.gov, that typically is not the complete set of inclusion criteria that the enrolling site would go through. So by that, I mean, we get as close as we can for what the patient would know about their own condition and what their physician has, and get to that point of there's the first date. But it requires the enrolling site to actually work through all of the medical criteria, and then, of course, going through the consent process in order to finalize it, if you will. So we try and get close, but we know we can't be exact. And the more information that the patient has, so if they have a particular mutation, like a particular KRAS mutation as an example, we can help you narrow the bullseye, if you will, to a very good target.
What do I need when I check out? Just nothing. Just leave.
Sorry, Roger, you might want, there you go.
I got him. Sorry.
Yeah, but further on that, say for example, if you have a particular KRAS 12D, for example, and then you might have a BRCA, you might have SMART4, something like that. Would the tool identify which of the KRAS 12D trials are better, for example?
Roger, if you
Or is
don't
that
mind, let me use that as a segue into just showing you how it might work, if that's okay. And I'll give you a sense of what the output is. That might picture's worth 1,000 words, as they say. So if you went to tricanhealth.com, this is what you'd see on the sort of landing page, if you will. There's a whole Learn section, which allows you to see a number of articles that we've written. Actually, Rob Wecker is an author of at least one of these and his input to several others. But it's things on, who's in your healthcare team, what questions should you ask at different stages of your treatment, why would you consider a clinical trial? Those are helpful summaries and good information, I think, to get you started. But Raj, to come back to your question, it's in this Find a Trial section. And I'm going to jump right to the more powerful one, which is this targeted search, which we just released in beta, just to give you a sense of how this might work. And then I'm also going to come around to Kathy as an example in a minute, but Raj, let's use your example. So if you had pancreatic cancer, most patients have something called PDAC, which is pancreatic ductal adenocarcinoma. And what you'll see is by applying these filters, if you've ever used TripAdvisor or Expedia, and you think of that left rail to narrow things down, that's what we do on this one as well. So we're narrowing it down to say, okay, here's your particular type of pancreatic cancer. Maybe it's stage 4. That narrows it down a little further. You mentioned KRAS biomarkers, so we'll narrow it down a little further. And in terms of trial treatment types, you can say, well, I'm looking for, a cell therapy or a preventive therapy if you want to narrow it down into those kinds of things. And you might want something, we've had some patients who say they definitely want something that is not blinded. They want to know if they're getting the treatment or not. So you have those kinds of options that you can apply. And you can see here that we default sort by what is closest. Now this is anchored to me because I'm here in Boston area. So it's going to list things that are located in Boston first and foremost. But you can see that it's taken what was hundreds of trials and narrowed it down to just a couple dozen. And then it sorts them by what is closest to me. So I get to the ones that are, physically located very close to me. And then let's see if any of these, if I scroll down, then I can get as far as, Philadelphia, New York, and so forth, that I'd have to travel a little bit to get to these trials down here. But it gives me a quick view of what is rapidly available. And then for any of these, I'm able to see this summary to say, okay, here's a particular trial, which is specifically for KRAS. I can read a quick summary about it. I can see that Revolution Medicine is the sponsor. If I happen to have read about that in the news or something, I can see what lines of therapy it's valid for. I can get some summaries of information. So one of the things we got was, hey, can you get a glossary of I don't know what line of therapy means. Can you tell me what that looks like? This gives you a sort of hover over capability to describe these different aspects that are being shown. And you can then take a look at the trial and see if that one might be a match for you. So if any of you do shopping on Amazon, a typical approach is people look at a bunch of stuff and then they just throw it in the cart, and then they go back and look at the cart and actually choose the subset of things that they want to buy. So you could say, this one's interesting. I'm going to save this trial, and I'm going to save it in Boston area trials for PDAC, and I'm going to put it in that folder so that I can go back and look at it later or share it with my physician. So I provided a lot of information there, But Raj, let me ask you, did I answer at least a portion of your question in terms of identifying the trials that are most relevant for you based on the information that that you provided in so far, which is in this case PDAC stage 4 with a KRAS mutation?
Yeah, it does. One thing that you also think about is the option that you said, whether you're looking for an immunotherapy trial or a cell therapy trial, identifying which is actually better for you, or which of these is better for you. Do you point to articles? Do you point to any kind of resources to help a patient navigate that?
It's a great question. I would say we stay away from that kind of medical advice, which would say that for a particular patient, cell therapy might be better than immunotherapy or vice versa. We would want the physician to do that in consultation with the patient, who would know much more than we could possibly know on this kind of online platform. But to your question, also, we do have this capability of, articles, and one of the ones we approach is biomarkers in personalized medicine, where we actually have an article which talks about the differences between, let me see if I can find it here, between the different biomarkers. I'm sorry, this is the wrong article, but we have one that actually talks about the different types of trials, different types of treatment types, and how they can attack things slightly differently, and it would be meant as a supplement to what the patient would get from their physician directly.
Got it. That's great.
Mike, in the scarce time and while you're here, could you do Kathy Peterson, please?
Absolutely. So Kathy, I'm going to clear these filters out, and we're going to do a quick search for you. Please feel free to share as much or as little information as you want to, and we'll do an example. And I'm going to start because if I remember correctly, you said you were in Louisville, Kentucky, right?
Right. Mhm.
I was there recently for a bourbon tour. It was lovely.
Oh, bourbon. It's everywhere.
So I'm going to start by putting that filter on first. So within, starting from Louisville and looking at a radius of, I picked an arbitrary 200 miles, but you can make that as broad or as narrow as you wish.
Yeah.
So we'll start there.
Yeah,
Tell me-
it could include Nashville, which might be, I don't know how far that is, but Nashville, Lexington, Louisville, Indianapolis, Cincinnati.
Okay. We'll move it out to
All of
maybe
those.
300 miles and see what we can pull.
Okay, all right.
Do you know what the type of pancreatic cancer they have? Is it
Yeah, I know that I have PDAC,
okay.
and that, yeah.
And I think you mentioned a biomarker. You have KRAS biomarker?
Yeah, I have KRAS G12F.
G12F. Okay, I'm going to come back to that in 1 second because that is a narrow lens. Have you had treatment yet?
I've had a lot of treatment. I'm stage 4. I've had a lot of treatment because I was diagnosed in October of 2020. So I've
Okay.
had the, I believe it's FOLFIRINOX, the first treatment.
Yep.
And then I had the Whipple. And then I had 30 days of radiation after the Whipple, along with Xeloda. And then I had several years, maybe 3 years, I don't know how many years, of Gemzar and Abraxane.
Okay. Some more chemo.
Okay. Then I had ablation of a tumor on my liver.
Okay.
18 months ago. And then I had another ablation just this month of a tumor on my liver. Oh, and I had another chemo, which was the one that was most recently approved for standard of care, 5-FU, leucovorin, and some other stuff.
Okay.
All right, so that's all I've had.
Terrific. All right, that gives us a great start. So the way I would think of it is in terms of a bullseye, right? So
Yeah.
we've already narrowed down from all pancreatic cancer trials to just those, within 300 miles of Louisville, for PDAC, for KRAS,
Uh-huh.
and for having had these different treatments. So what we've done
Yes.
is removed from the list things that for which you would be disqualified because you've got, a different form of cancer than it's trying to look for, or, they would look for first line of therapy or something. So we've narrowed this down. So there's 16 trials
Mm-hmm.
that would be a good fit for you, potentially
Oh.
a good fit for you within this 300-mile radius.
Oh.
And it's interesting you have that reaction, because that's what we notice most often is most folks would assume that there might be one or two trials that might fit, and are generally surprised
Mm-hmm.
that there are often many different options. Now, to be fair,
Good.
we haven't gone through every single category here, so there might be some additional things that would narrow this list further,
Yes. Yeah.
but it's a starting point, right?
Yeah.
And what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this search, and
Uh-huh.
I'm going to call it Kathy.
Uh-huh.
And that way, we can connect if you'd like after
Yes,
this
I would.
conversation, and I can share all these with you and go through in more detail. But I wanted to start here.
Okay.
So this is, if you will, a pretty narrow center of the bullseye, but I'm going to enter one more thing to see if we can get a direct hit in the center, because you
Mm-hmm.
said you had the G12F
Yes.
mutation. And as you say, the F mutation is rare. So what we're not seeing is something that specifically targets that mutation
No.
with all those other filters applied. There are some which have G12C or G12D. So that's what's picking up in the smaller set.
Mm-hmm.
But so we'd have to, again, we can't go to the very center of the bullseye, so we might go a little bit farther.
Uh-huh.
And there's one other thing we can try. Let me try this, which is G12F, but then I'm going to remove the geography. So I'm not seeing any trials that are specific to G12F that fit these
No.
other categories, even on a national level. But I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to see if that was the case, just, how that worked
Okay.
out. But what you can see is that you'll see these. Oh, I need to re-enter the Louisville. And what you'll see is you can find some that are in Lexington or in Cincinnati, and then additional areas that can potentially be of interest,
Mm-hmm.
so that we can find sort of the right set that was appropriate for you. And I'm going to come back to the search, and I'm going to look here, say find trials, and that pulls us back up to those 16 results. So
Okay.
this one probably would not fit because it's specific to G12C, but this one may be a good option for you when it's run by the NCI. You can see it's targeting various forms of KRAS. It's right there in Lexington. And this is how you would sort of say, all right, this one is of interest. I'm going to click here, and I'm going to save this trial, and I'm going to save it for a new album, call it Kathy album. So what I've done is created a search save so that I can get all the trials that would fall under that search. And then I'm creating an album, which is for the specific ones that may be of interest to you.
Okay.
And then you can share it, say copy a link, and then I could, you could send an email to your physician or to your family member and say, hey, this is a trial that I found. Would this be of interest? And you could have a good conversation with your physician to understand what's being tested, whether it may or may not be a good fit for you, and how you might proceed. And then if you were interested, you can see that it's here at University of Kentucky. And, you can get access to the information in that way. You can also have access directly to clinicaltrials.gov, which is the source data. So we give direct access to that info, so you're not limited in where you would go.
Good. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. So what we had shown earlier was information on sort of my contact information, which is just mike.harris@tricanhealth.com. It's also on the site, and happy to answer any questions that we can, offline.
Yeah.
I see
Yeah,
Rob's got a question. That's probably all the time we'll have, so I'll try and answer your question quickly, Rob.
So, yeah, hi, Mike. Quick question, just building off Kathy's case, right? So I'm wondering if there's intent on your platform to extend, for example, to say, hey, Kathy, if you took this biomarker test, it would help better inform you and your medical team to make a better decision. And do you sort of look to extend it in that direction?
Short answer is yes. So what Rob's getting at is a great point, which is make sure that the patient is as prepared as possible so that the time frame is compressed, so that they don't show up to a trial site and they say, oh, actually, you need this test and this information and so forth. We want to equip the patient so that you have everything that you need, so that when you show up and present to the trial site, that you could, advance quickly. You could move quickly through the process. That's what we're aiming to do. We don't have that right now, Rob. What we want to do is to use the AI approach to actually extract that from all the inclusion-exclusion criteria, so that in this case, Kathy, you'd be well prepared to have all the information available so that when you did show up to the trial site, they wouldn't ask for additional information. Ideally, you'd have sort of everything and be ready to go. So that's the intent.
Just a wrap up, Mike, just two things that I typically do at the end is ask you to, parting words of wisdom, like summaries, like the main idea.
Yep.
But I'd also like you to go back and touch on the title that you chose for this discussion.
Yes.
Which was Solving Information Inequities Between Cancer Patients, Their Doctors, and Clinical Trial Sponsors. So we spent most of our time talking about how would a pancreatic cancer patient navigate their decisions, but you're actually pointing at a systemic thing that you're addressing here too. So I'd like you to speak to that, and then again, as I said, any parting words of wisdom.
Again, thanks for the tee up, and thanks for the opportunity. The way I would describe it, Brad, is the physicians themselves have a lot of information in their hospital and about the trials with which they are familiar. Clinical trial sponsors know a huge amount of information about the trials that they are running. Most patients are uninformed about all of it, and it's really hard to get access to the details that those other two parties have. In our view, that inequity of information, that availability of knowledge, limits the pace of scientific progress, and it limits access to what are potentially life-saving medicines and treatments that patients could get access to. So we're trying to reduce, we'll never eliminate, but we want to reduce those inequities between those three parties and make them co-equal partners, if you will, so that there can be shared decision-making among those three, so that we can get patients to the right trials for them with the advice and consent and agreement of their physicians. That's what we're aiming to do. And if we're able to at least make progress on that front, if not achieve that goal, then I would consider it a great success. So I'll leave you with this one, which is, we're just trying to help patients navigate clinical trials. We want to bring that advanced medicine within reach. This QR code, if you look at it with your phone, you can actually access the website directly. But you all have been fantastic in terms of information. I'll post information to the pancreatic cancer space in the discussion hub. Any follow-on questions, please let me know. And thank you again for the opportunity to meet with you all. You've been an excellent group to speak with.